Nicole didn't even have time to react. One moment she was balancing the tray of champagne flutes. The next, Charlotte Virginia's hand connected with her shoulder, hard and deliberate. The marble floor rushed up to meet her. Glass shattered. Champagne sprayed across white tablecloths. And Charlotte's phone camera captured every second of Nicole's fall. Her face hitting the floor, the restaurant's elite patrons gasping and laughing in equal measure. The room went silent, then erupted in whispers. Nicole lay there, liquid soaking through her uniform, humiliation burning hotter than the pain in her palms. Phones lifted around the dining room like a forest of judgment. And from a table near the window, a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit slowly set down his wine glass. No one dared look directly at him. No one had to, because everyone at the Gilded Spoon knew exactly who he was. Florenzo Trentino, the Italian businessman whose name people only whispered. He rose from his chair with controlled precision, buttoning his jacket. Then, turning to the girl who stood over Nicole recording, he said, his voice carrying the quiet weight of absolute authority, "Put the phone down. And apologize. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel now. Let's get started." The reservation book at the Gilded Spoon never had empty spaces on Friday nights. Crystal chandeliers cast warm amber light over tables draped in imported Italian linen. The air hummed with quiet wealth, the clink of sterling silver on bone china, the murmur of seven-figure business deals discussed over $28 appetizers, and the soft jazz trio playing in the corner that most patrons didn't even notice. For Nicole Smith, 24, it was just another shift, another night of invisible labor that would barely cover her share of rent in the apartment she split with two other servers. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile professional and empty, worn smooth by years of being looked through rather than at. The Gilded Spoon was the kind of establishment that made a statement simply by existing. Hand-painted murals of Tuscan vineyards adorned the walls. The carpet was so thick it swallowed footsteps. Even the bathrooms had fresh orchids replaced daily. It catered to the city's elite. Politicians, CEOs, old money families whose names appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. Nicole worked here because the tips were good, when the customers remembered to look at their server's face long enough to calculate 20%. At table 17, near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights, sat four men. They were there every Friday without fail. Dark suits, quiet conversation in Italian, minimal orders but generous tips left in cash. They commanded respect through stillness alone. The other servers whispered about them, who they might be, what they did. But Nicole had learned long ago that curiosity was a luxury people like her couldn't afford. She brought their water, their wine, their carefully prepared dishes, and she never asked questions. She'd felt their eyes follow her movements across the dining room, not with desire, but with the kind of assessment that made her skin prickle with awareness. That night, everything shattered. The entrance doors opened with a dramatic sweep, and the air pressure in the room seemed to change. 5 young people swept in like they were arriving at a movie premiere. Designer clothes that cost more than Nicole made in 6 months, jewelry that caught the chandelier light and threw it back like weapons. Their laughter was loud, performative, designed to announce their presence to every corner of the establishment. At the center of the group was Charlotte Virginia, 21, daughter of the Virginia family whose real estate empire had shaped the city's skyline. Everyone knew the Virginias. They owned the building the Gilded Spoon occupied. They didn't dine here, they held court. Nicole's chest tightened. She recognized that particular brand of entitled cruelty, the kind that viewed service workers as props in their social media theater. They chose table 9, directly in the center of the dining room where they could be seen from every angle. Charlotte snapped her fingers without looking up from her phone. Nicole approached, order pad ready, breathing slowly through her nose. "Good evening." What can I bring you tonight? Charlotte glanced up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Champagne. The Cristal. 4 bottles. And make it quick. Nicole kept her voice even. Of course. May I see identification, please? The table went silent. Charlotte's perfectly contoured face hardened. Excuse me. For the alcohol service. Restaurant policy. One of Charlotte's friends, a young man in a designer leather jacket, lifted his phone and started recording. Oh, this is gonna be good. Charlotte leaned back in her chair, assessing Nicole the way someone might examine an insect. Do you know who I am? I do, Miss Virginia. I still need to see ID. My family, Charlotte said slowly, enunciating each word like Nicole might be simple, owns this building. We funded the renovation that allows you to work in a restaurant this nice instead of some roadside dive. And you're seriously going to ask me for identification? Nicole felt heat creeping up her neck. Other diners were watching now. Conversations pausing mid-sentence. It's the law, ma'am. I could lose my license to serve. Charlotte's expression shifted into something uglier. Oh, sweetie. The condescension dripped from every syllable. Look at yourself. Cheap shoes. Worn uniform. You probably take the bus here, don't you? She gestured vaguely at Nicole's whole person. You smell like desperation and day-old coffee. This place has standards and frankly, I'm shocked they let you through the front door. The laughter from her table cut through Nicole like broken glass. She felt her face burn, her throat constrict. Just walk away, she told herself. You've survived worse. You can survive this. I'll send the manager over, she said quietly, turning toward the kitchen. Then she felt it. A hand, sharp and sudden, slamming into her shoulder blade. The tray tipped. Her balance went. The world tilted and the marble floor rushed up faster than thought. She hit hard, knees first, then hands splaying out to catch herself, finally her cheeks scraping against polished stone. Champagne flutes exploded around her in a cascade of glass and liquid. White wine soaked through her uniform, cold against her skin, mixing with the red sauce from someone's pasta that had been on the tray, staining the white fabric like wounds. For 3 seconds there was absolute silence. Then Charlotte's voice, bright with mock concern. Oh my God, she just fell. Did everyone see that? She literally just collapsed. Nicole pushed herself up to her hands and knees, glass crunching beneath her palms. Her hair had fallen loose from its tie, hanging in her face. Liquid dripped from her chin. And everywhere, phones were rising. A dozen cameras pointed at her like accusatory fingers, capturing her humiliation in high definition, ready to be shared and laughed at by thousands of strangers. Look at her, Charlotte continued, her phone extended to get the perfect angle. Can't even carry a tray without making a scene. Maybe try a job you can actually handle, sweetie. Like, I don't know, staying home. The laughter was worse than the fall. It echoed off the high ceilings, bounced between the marble columns, filled every corner of the room. Some diners looked away uncomfortably. Others whispered behind their hands. But no one spoke. No one moved. No one helped. Nicole stayed frozen on her knees, one hand pressed against a wet stain spreading across her uniform, the other bleeding slightly from where glass had cut her palm. 1,000 responses crowded her mind. Anger, humiliation, the urge to scream or cry or simply disappear into the floor. But years of swallowing her dignity had taught her that nothing she said would matter. People like Charlotte always won. Then, cutting through the awful silence, came a sound that made every person in the restaurant go rigid. The scrape of a chair pushing back. Low. Deliberate. Heavy with intent. From table 17, near the windows where the city lights glittered like a kingdom he ruled, Florenzo Trentino stood. He moved with a kind of unhurried precision that made speed unnecessary, the way apex predators move when they've already decided on their prey. His three companions remained seated, but their postures changed, bodies tensing with readiness even as their hands stayed visible on the table. They didn't need to move. Everyone in that room understood what that single motion meant. Florenzo Trentino was a ghost story told in whispers. An Italian businessman whose restaurants and nightclubs and construction companies were fronts for an empire built on loyalty, fear, and blood. He never raised his voice. He never made threats. He didn't have to. His reputation did the work for him. He crossed the dining room with measured steps, his handmade Italian leather shoes barely making a sound against the thick carpet, then clicking softly against the marble near table 9. The jazz trio's music died mid-phrase. Conversations evaporated. Charlotte's friends slowly lowered their phones, their bravado crumbling like sand castles against an incoming tide. Charlotte herself tried to hold her ground, but her hand trembled around her phone. She opened her mouth to say something clever, something cutting, but the words dried up when Florenzo stopped beside Nicole, looking down at the woman still kneeling in broken glass and spilled wine. For a moment he said nothing. His dark eyes, brown so deep it looked black in the chandelier light, took in the scene with forensic precision. The glass embedded in Nicole's palm, the wine staining her uniform, the tears she was fighting to hold back, the phone still recording. His jaw clenched once, a muscle jumping beneath his close-trimmed beard, then released. He reached for a cloth napkin from the nearest table. His voice, when it came, was low and calm and absolutely certain. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to command obedience. "Don't move, Cara." The endearment rolled off his tongue like a promise and a warning combined. Not mocking, not pitying, simply factual, as though she already belonged under his protection and he was merely acknowledging what everyone should have known. Nicole's breath caught. She hadn't expected gentleness. She'd expected anger directed at her for causing a scene, for disrupting the elegant atmosphere of the Gilded Spoon. Instead, Florenzo crouched down beside her with a grace that seemed impossible for a man his size. His expensive suit somehow not wrinkling, and carefully lifted her injured hand. He examined the cut, turning her palm up to the light, and his expression darkened further. Without a word, he used the cloth napkin to carefully press against the wound. His touch firm but careful, and then he looked up at her face. "This," he said quietly, still holding her hand, "will be the last time anyone makes you bleed in my city." Then he rose, still holding the napkin against her palm, and finally, he turned his attention to Charlotte Virginia. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You," Florenzo said, his voice still quiet, still controlled, but now edged with something that made several diners push back from their tables, "are going to do 3 things. You will put down that phone. You will help her to her feet. And you will apologize." Charlotte's face cycled through shock, indignation, and then something close to fear. "Do you know who my father?" "I know exactly who your father is," Florenzo interrupted, his tone never rising but somehow filling the entire restaurant. "I know he financed his first development with money borrowed from my organization. I know about the property deals his lawyer claimed were legitimate. I know which city council members he pays under the table." He took one step closer to Charlotte's table. "Just one. So when I tell you to apologize, ragazza, you will understand that I am giving you a courtesy your family stopped deserving 5 years ago." The silence was so complete that Nicole could hear her own heartbeat. Charlotte's phone clattered onto the table. Her friends had gone pale, backing away from her like she carried a contagion. Charlotte herself seemed to be calculating rapidly, weighing her father's influence against the reality of the man standing before her, a man whose power didn't come from real estate holdings or political connections, but from something far more primal and absolute. Her voice came out small, stripped of its earlier cruelty. I'm sorry." Florenzo didn't move. "Not to me." Charlotte's eyes dropped to Nicole, still kneeling on the floor, still being held gently by Florenzo's hand on hers. "I'm sorry," she said again, and this time tears of humiliation streaked her carefully applied makeup. "I'm sorry for pushing you." Florenzo held Charlotte's gaze for 3 more seconds, letting the weight of his silence communicate what words couldn't. Then he turned back to Nicole, dismissing Charlotte so completely it was as if she'd ceased to exist. "Can you stand, Cara?" he asked gently. Nicole nodded mutely. Florenzo helped her to her feet with surprising tenderness, steadying her elbow while she found her balance in her wine-soaked shoes. Glass fell from her skirt in tiny, glittering pieces. The restaurant manager rushed over, stammering apologies, offering compensation, clearly terrified of losing Florenzo's business. Florenzo cut him off with a raised hand. "She's done for tonight," he said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Then to Nicole, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, "Let me take you somewhere safe. We need to talk about what happens next." Nicole looked up at him, this dangerous man whose reputation made grown men nervous, who just casually threatened one of the city's most powerful families, and saw something unexpected in his dark eyes. Not pity, not desire, but a kind of recognition, as though he saw past the uniform and the humiliation to the person underneath who'd been invisible for far too long. She should say no. She should thank him politely and leave through the service entrance and never look back. Instead, with wine still dripping from her hair and glass dust glittering on her knees, Nicole Smith nodded. "Okay," she whispered. Florenzo's hand settled protectively on her lower back, guiding her toward the entrance while his men moved to flank them. Behind them, Charlotte Virginia sobbed into her hands while her friends scrambled to delete videos from their phones. The other diners watched in stunned silence as the Mafia boss escorted a waitress out of the Gilded Spoon like she was the most important person in the room. And perhaps, for the first time in Nicole's life, she was. Florenzo's hand remained steady on Nicole's elbow as he guided her to a chair at an empty table near the kitchen entrance, away from the scattered glass and spreading wine. She sat because her legs had stopped working properly, shock settling into her bones like winter cold. He gestured to one of his men, a lean figure with silver threading through his dark hair, who immediately appeared with a clean napkin and a glass of water. Nicole took it with trembling hands, not drinking, just holding it because it gave her something to focus on besides the weight of every eye in the restaurant. Florenzo straightened to his full height and turned back toward table 9, where Charlotte Virginia stood frozen, her phone now abandoned on the white tablecloth like evidence at a crime scene. Her friends had instinctively moved away from her, creating distance, suddenly strangers to her cruelty. The restaurant held its collective breath. "Miss Virginia," Florenzo said, his voice carrying across the dining room with the same quiet authority he'd used before, the kind of tone that didn't need volume because it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I believe we have unfinished business." Charlotte's chin lifted in a last attempt at defiance, muscle memory of a lifetime of getting away with everything. "My father will hear about this. He'll have your businesses shut down, your liquor licenses revoked. You can't just—" "Your father," Florenzo interrupted, taking one measured step toward her. His hands relaxed at his sides but his shoulders carrying the coiled tension of controlled violence, "owes my organization $400,000 from a loan he took in 2019 to cover his Riverside development losses. The paperwork is very detailed, very official, very inconvenient should it surface during his next re-election campaign." He paused, letting that information settle into the room like sediment in still water. "So perhaps before you make threats about licenses and politicians, you should call him and ask if declaring war on me is truly the wisest course of action for your family." The color drained from Charlotte's face, her foundation suddenly too dark against her paling skin. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. Florenzo took another step. His men hadn't moved from their table, but their presence pressed against the room like a physical force. I asked you to apologize. You gave words. T1s. Now you will apologize with meaning, or I will ensure that every person in this restaurant, every business owner in this city, every family that matters, knows exactly what kind of person Charlotte Virginia is. His voice dropped lower, intimate and terrible. I will make certain that you become invisible, the way you tried to make her invisible. And unlike your father's money, my memory does not fade. Charlotte's hands shook. Tears spilled down her cheeks, cutting tracks through her makeup, mascara pooling in the corners of her eyes. This wasn't the pretty, delicate crying she'd perfected for social media. This was raw fear, humiliation reflected back at her like a mirror she couldn't escape. She looked at Nicole, really looked at her for the first time, seeing not a prop but a person whose dignity she'd tried to destroy for entertainment. I'm sorry, Charlotte whispered, her voice breaking on the words. I'm truly sorry. What I did was cruel and wrong, and you didn't deserve any of it. I'm so sorry. Nicole stared at her. This girl who moments ago had been untouchable, now crumbling under the weight of consequences she'd never had to face before. Part of Nicole wanted to accept it, to be gracious. Another part, the part that had been invisible for so long, wanted to watch her suffer longer. She settled for a small nod, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Florenzo turned his gaze to Charlotte's friends, who looked ready to bolt for the exits. You should leave. All of you. And you should delete every video, every photograph, every piece of footage you recorded tonight. Because if I see anything online in a group chat whispered about in your social circles, I will know. And I will respond appropriately. He gestured toward the door with a casual wave that somehow felt like a command from a general dismissing defeated soldiers. Go! They scattered like startled birds, designer bags clutched to their chests, heels clicking frantically against marble as they fled toward the entrance. Charlotte paused at the door, looking back once at the wreckage she'd caused, the broken glass still glittering on the floor, the wine stains spreading like blood, the waitress she tried to humiliate now under the protection of the city's most dangerous man. Then she disappeared into the night, and the door swung shut behind her with a soft, final click. The restaurant remained silent for another heartbeat. Then, gradually, conversations resumed in hushed tones, silverware clinked against plates, the jazz trio started playing again, tentative at first, then stronger. Life returning to normal, except nothing would be normal again. Nicole sat with the untouched water glass still cradled in her hands, her uniform clinging to her skin where wine had soaked through, her palm throbbing where glass had cut deep enough to leave a mark. She felt hollowed out, like something essential had been scooped away, and she was just a shell going through motions. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind a trembling exhaustion that made her bones feel liquid. Gerald Morrison, the restaurant manager, materialized at her side with the apologetic smile he reserved for situations that threatened his careful reputation. He was a thin man in his 50s who'd built his career on smoothing over problems before they became lawsuits, on making unpleasantness disappear with the right combination of money and discretion. He crouched beside her chair, his voice pitched low and soothing, meant only for her ears. Nicole, I am so terribly sorry about what happened tonight. Absolutely inexcusable behavior. He produced an envelope from his jacket pocket, already prepared, as if he'd anticipated needing to make something go away. I'd like to offer you the rest of the week off, paid of course, and a little something extra for your trouble. $500. No need to make this into anything more complicated than it needs to be. Nicole stared at the envelope. $500. 2 weeks of groceries. Part of her electric bill. A bandage on a wound that required stitches. She opened her mouth to accept it because that's what she did. She accepted what was offered, took what little she could get and moved on. That won't be necessary. Florenzo's voice cut through Gerald's placating tone like a blade through silk. He'd moved so quietly that neither of them had noticed him approach. He stood behind Nicole's chair now, one hand resting lightly on the back of it, a posture that looked casual but established clear ownership of the situation. Gerald straightened immediately, the envelope disappearing back into his pocket as if it had never existed. "Mr. Trentino, I assure you the situation has been handled." "The situation," Florenzo said, his dark eyes fixed on Gerald with a kind of attention that made small prey animals freeze, "has not even begun to unfold. Miss Virginia will go home tonight. She will tell her father what happened. And her father, who is not a man accustomed to his daughter facing consequences, will make this waitress's life very difficult." He glanced down at Nicole, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "They will find her address. They will call her employer. They will threaten lawsuits, press charges for assault or theft or whatever fiction their lawyers can construct. They will use every resource they have to destroy her because that is what people like the Virginias do when someone embarrasses them." Gerald shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to argue but lacking the courage to contradict a man whose word carried more weight than any lease agreement. "I'm sure it won't come to that." "It will," Florenzo said with absolute certainty. "It already has. The moment I intervened, this became about power, not justice. And the Virginias cannot allow the appearance that someone else holds more power than they do." He turned his full attention to Nicole, dismissing Gerald entirely. "You have two choices. You can go home tonight, wait for the storm to hit, and face it alone. Or you can accept my protection." Nicole looked up at him, this dangerous man with ink creeping up his neck and violence implicit in every controlled movement, and felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Something flickered across Florenzo's face, gone too quickly to name. "I know enough. I know you work 3 double shifts a week because I've seen you here every Friday for 6 months. I know you take the bus because I've watched you leave through the service entrance at midnight to catch the last one. I know you're alone because no one has ever picked you up. No one calls you during your breaks." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "And I know what it looks like when someone has learned to make themselves small, to disappear, to survive by being invisible. I recognize it because I grew up that way too, before I learned that the only way to stop being a victim is to become powerful enough that no one dares make you one." The words hit her like a physical blow, stripping away every defense she'd built. He'd seen her. Actually seen her, not as background furniture but as a person, and that terrified her more than anything else that had happened tonight. "If I go with you," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, "what happens to me?" "You stay at a property I own. Secure. Private. My people will ensure no one touches you, threatens you, or finds you until this is resolved." His expression remained serious. No false reassurance, just facts. "I won't lie to you, Nicole. My world is complicated and dangerous. But right now, it's safer than yours." She thought about her studio apartment with a lock that didn't quite catch, the landlord who asked too many questions, the complete absence of anyone who would notice if she disappeared. She thought about Charlotte's father with his money and lawyers and ruthless reputation for crushing anyone who challenged his family. She thought about being alone, the way she'd always been alone, and how that had never protected her from anything. "Okay," Nicole heard herself say, the word leaving her lips before her mind fully agreed to it. "I'll go with you." Florenzo's hand moved from the chair to her shoulder, a touch that was gentle but grounding, anchoring her to this impossible decision. "Get your things. We leave now." The black SUV moved through the city like a shadow, tinted windows reflecting streetlights as they passed through neighborhoods that gradually shifted from commercial districts to tree-lined streets where homes hid behind gates and walls. Nicole sat in the back seat beside Florenzo, her small backpack clutched in her lap containing everything she'd brought to work, a change of clothes, her phone charger, a book she never had time to read. 2 of Florenzo's men occupied the front seats, silent and alert, their eyes constantly scanning mirrors and side streets with the vigilance of people who knew threats could materialize from anywhere. Florenzo made a call in Italian, his voice low and rapid, the language rolling off his tongue with a fluency that reminded Nicole how little she actually knew about this man whose protection she'd just accepted. He glanced at her once during the conversation, his expression unreadable, then ended the call and slipped the phone back into his jacket pocket. "You're safe now," he said simply, as if saying it made it true. The SUV turned onto a private road, and an iron gate swung open before they reached it, cameras tracking their approach from hidden positions in the manicured hedges. The driveway curved through grounds lit by subtle landscape lighting that revealed glimpses of perfectly maintained gardens, a fountain centerpiece, and stone pathways leading to darkness. Then the house emerged from the trees like something from a film, a sprawling estate that managed to be both modern and classical, all clean lines and warm stone, floor-to-ceiling windows glowing with interior light. Nicole had served people who lived in houses like this. She'd never imagined being inside one as anything other than staff. The SUV stopped beneath a covered entrance where two more men waited, both wearing dark suits and the same watchful expression as Florenzo's other guards. They opened doors, exchanged brief words in Italian, and one of them spoke into a radio clipped to his collar. Florenzo exited first, then extended his hand to help Nicole out, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that felt surreal after everything that had happened. Inside, the house was even more overwhelming. The entrance hall featured marble floors that caught light from a modern chandelier, abstract art on the walls that Nicole suspected was original and probably worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime, and a staircase that curved upward to a second floor she couldn't fully see. Everything was immaculate, expensive, and somehow still felt lived in rather than sterile. This wasn't a showpiece. This was a fortress disguised as a home. A woman in her 60s approached, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing simple but elegant clothing. She smiled at Nicole with genuine warmth that felt startling after the coldness of Charlotte's world. "You must be Nicole." "Maria. I manage the household." She shot Florenzo a look that somehow managed to be both respectful and maternal. "She looks exhausted and half-frozen. I'll prepare the guest suite and bring something to eat." "Thank you, Maria," Florenzo said, and Nicole caught the affection in his voice, a softness he hadn't shown to anyone else. Maria disappeared down a hallway, leaving Nicole standing in the entrance hall feeling completely out of place in her stained uniform and cheap shoes on marble that probably cost more per square foot than her monthly rent. She watched as two more men entered through a side door, conferring quietly with Florenzo's guards, clearly coordinating security rotations. One of them carried what looked like a tablet displaying camera feeds from around the property. Another adjusted a radio on his belt, murmuring updates to someone she couldn't see. "How many people work here?" Nicole asked, her voice sounding small in the vast space. "In the house 7, Florenzo said, unbuttoning his jacket. "Security, another 12 on rotating shifts. Groundskeepers, maintenance, kitchen staff, maybe 20 total." He watched her process those numbers, saw the growing understanding on her face. "This is what protection looks like, Nicole. Not luck, not hope. Layers of people who are loyal, who are paid well, who understand that threats are neutralized before they reach the door." She thought about her studio apartment with its single deadbolt and a superintendent who never answered calls. "I don't understand this world." "You don't have to understand it," Florenzo said, his dark eyes holding hers with unexpected gentleness. "You just have to trust that while you're here, no one can hurt you. Not Charlotte, Virginia, not her father, not their lawyers or their money or their influence." He moved closer, his presence commanding but not threatening. "Tomorrow we'll discuss what comes next. Tonight you rest. You're safe here." Maria reappeared at the top of the staircase, gesturing them up. Florenzo placed his hand lightly on Nicole's lower back, guiding her toward the stairs while guards repositioned themselves throughout the first floor, a choreography of protection that never stopped, never rested. As they climbed, Nicole glanced back once and saw one of the men checking his phone, another adjusting a camera angle on his tablet, both of them alert even in this moment of apparent calm. She was inside a fortress, protected by dangerous men, in the home of someone whose name made people whisper. And somehow, impossibly, she felt safer than she had in years. Nicole woke to unfamiliar softness, Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like water against her skin, morning light filtering through sheer curtains that probably cost more than her entire bedroom set back home. For 3 disoriented seconds, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The restaurant, the fall, Charlotte's cruelty, Florenzo's intervention. She sat up, her palms still bandaged from the glass cuts, and reached for her phone on the nightstand. 47 missed calls. 132 text messages. Her social media notifications had exceeded the display limit, simply showing 99+ in red bubbles that looked like warnings. Her hands started shaking before she even opened the first one. The video had been edited with surgical precision. It started with Nicole approaching Charlotte's table, but the audio was distorted, making her polite request for identification sound aggressive, confrontational. The push had been cut entirely, replaced with footage that made it look like Nicole had simply dropped the tray, then lunged at Charlotte. The angle made Charlotte look smaller, defensive, Nicole larger and threatening. Comments flooded beneath it, thousands of them, each one a knife. Crazy waitress attacks customer. This is why you tip, they lose their minds. She looks like she's on something, look at her eyes. Rich girl was just defending herself. Nicole's breath came shallow and fast. She scrolled further, finding the video shared across platforms, each iteration adding new commentary, new cruelty. Someone had found her social media profiles. Her address somehow leaked in the comments. Her phone buzzed with another text, this one from a number she didn't recognize. You're done. Everyone knows what you did. A knock on the door made her jump. Maria entered carrying a breakfast tray, took one look at Nicole's face, and immediately set the tray down to sit beside her on the bed. You've seen it, she said, not a question. How is this happening? Nicole's voice cracked. That's not what happened. That's not. Come, Maria said gently, taking the phone from Nicole's trembling hands. Mr. Trentino needs to see this. They found Florenzo in his office, a room of dark wood and leather that smelled of expensive tobacco and old books. He sat behind a desk with 3 monitors displaying various news feeds and social media streams. His expression carved from stone. 2 of his men stood near the windows, one speaking rapidly into a phone in Italian. Florenzo looked up when they entered, and his jaw tightened as he saw Nicole's tear-streaked face. Show me, he said. Nicole handed him her phone with numb fingers. He watched the doctored video once, then again, his expression growing darker with each viewing. When he finished, he set the phone down with controlled precision and pulled up something on his own screen. A press release, already published by 3 major news outlets. Statement from the Virginia family, the headline read. Below it, carefully crafted lies dressed up as concern. Last night, our daughter Charlotte was verbally assaulted and physically threatened by an unstable restaurant employee at the Gilded Spoon. Despite attempting to de-escalate the situation, Charlotte was forced to defend herself when the employee became violent. We are exploring all legal options to ensure this individual receives appropriate psychiatric evaluation and that she is held accountable for her actions. We urge anyone with information about this person's whereabouts to contact our legal team immediately. Nicole felt the room tilt. They're saying I threatened her. They're saying I'm dangerous. They want people to find me. They want you afraid, Florenzo said, standing. His voice was calm, but violence simmered beneath it like magma under stone. They want you to run, to hide, to disappear so their narrative becomes the only truth. He moved around the desk to stand before her, his presence solid and grounding. "This is what I warned you about, Kara. The Virginias are doing exactly what powerful people do when someone makes them look weak. They attack, they lie, they use their resources to rewrite reality. How do I fight this?" Nicole's voice broke on the words. "I'm no one. Have nothing. They have lawyers and money and—" "You have me," Florenzo interrupted, his dark eyes blazing with quiet fury. "And unlike their lawyers and their money, I don't fight in courtrooms. I fight in the shadows where they think they're safe." He turned to one of his men. "Call Matteo. I want every piece of security footage from the Gilded Spoon from last night. The real footage, unedited. I want phone records. I want to know who Charlotte called after she left. And I want background on the Virginia family's legal team by this afternoon." The man nodded and left immediately. Florenzo turned back to Nicole, his expression softening slightly. "They made a mistake when they went to war with you because now they're at war with me. And I promise you, Nicole, by the time I'm finished, the truth won't just come out, it will bury them." The next 72 hours unfolded like watching a machine work. Precise, methodical, unstoppable. Florenzo's estate transformed into a command center, men arriving and departing at all hours with folders, hard drives, and information that appeared as if summoned from thin air. Nicole observed from the margins, still wearing borrowed clothes from Maria, still processing the reality that her life had become a battlefield she hadn't chosen but couldn't escape. On the second morning, a thin man in wire-rimmed glasses arrived carrying a laptop sealed in a tamper-proof case. He spoke to Florenzo in rapid Italian, then opened the laptop on the dining room table where Nicole sat with untouched coffee. "This is Marco," Florenzo said, gesturing to the man. "He handles my digital security. Marco, show her what you found." Marco's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up file after file. "The Gilded Spoon has 8 security cameras. The footage your manager provided to the police and media came from camera 3, which conveniently cuts out Charlotte pushing you and restarts with you on the ground." He opened another window. "But the restaurant system backs up to a cloud server every 15 minutes. The management deleted the local copies, but they forgot about the backup." He turned the screen toward Nicole. "This is the complete, unedited footage." Nicole watched herself approach the table, watched Charlotte's hand shoot out and shove her shoulder, watched herself fall in slow motion while Charlotte's friends recorded and laughed. The audio was crystal clear. Every cruel word, every mocking laugh, Charlotte's deliberate cruelty captured in high definition with timestamps that couldn't be disputed. "How did you get this?" Nicole whispered. Marco smiled faintly. "The cloud service's security is adequate. But adequate isn't enough when someone knows exactly where to look." He glanced at Florenzo, who nodded once. "I also retrieved deleted files from phones belonging to Charlotte's friends. Text messages planning the incident beforehand, discussing how funny it would be to humiliate a waitress, betting on whether anyone would intervene." Florenzo leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching Nicole's face as she processed what this meant. Premeditation. Conspiracy to assault. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Their lawyers will have a difficult time explaining this away. "But that's not all," Marco continued, opening another folder. "Mr. Trentino asked me to look into the Virginia family's business dealings." The screen filled with documents, bank transfers, emails, photographs of men in suits exchanging envelopes. Harold Virginia, Charlotte's father, has been accepting bribes from construction companies for zoning approvals for the past 6 years. He's also used campaign funds to pay for his mistress's apartment and his son's gambling debts. The paper trail is extensive. Nicole stared at the documents, her mind struggling to comprehend the scope of what she was seeing. Where did all this come from? People talk, Florenzo said simply. Especially to people they fear or owe favors to. I've been in this city a long time, Nicole. I know which accountants get nervous when asked the right questions, which lawyers keep insurance files in case their clients turn on them, which city officials remember who really controls the permits and contracts. He moved to stand beside her, looking down at the screen. The Virginians built their empire on corruption. They just forgot that empires built on secrets are vulnerable to anyone who knows how to find them. That afternoon, another man arrived. Older, distinguished, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had survived decades of use. Florenzo introduced him as Antonio, his attorney. Antonio spread more documents across the table. These ones legal briefs, affidavits, witness statements from other restaurant staff who'd seen Charlotte's cruelty toward servers before, medical records from the hospital where Nicole's hand had been treated, time-stamped and photographed. We have enough to file criminal charges, Antonio said. His voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who'd never lost a case he cared about. Assault, conspiracy, witness tampering. The edited video alone constitutes evidence tampering. And with the additional material regarding Harold Virginia's corruption, we can ensure the district attorney's office takes this seriously rather than burying it. Nicole looked at the mountain of evidence, the result of 3 days of work by people she'd never met, resources she couldn't fathom, all mobilized because Florenzo Trentino had decided she deserved protection. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, turning to face him. "This must be costing you money." Florenzo interrupted, something almost like amusement flickering across his face. "Money is a tool, Nicole. Power is what matters. And right now, I'm teaching the Virginians a lesson they should have learned long ago. That there are people in this city whose power doesn't come from political connections or real estate holdings." His expression hardened. "They tried to destroy you because they thought you were powerless. I'm showing them what happens when they miscalculate." Nicole looked at the evidence, at Marco still working on his laptop, at Antonio reviewing legal documents, at the guard stationed throughout the house, at Florenzo standing beside her with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never lost a war. For the first time since that night at the restaurant, she felt something other than fear. She felt the possibility of justice. The preparation consumed the following week. Antonio needed Nicole to review every document, confirm every detail, memorize the timeline until she could recite it in her sleep. They sat for hours in Florenzo's study, going over her testimony, anticipating questions hostile lawyers would ask, teaching her how to remain calm under interrogation. Nicole discovered she hated being the center of attention almost as much as she hated being invisible. "You're doing well," Antonio said during one session, closing his folder with evident satisfaction. "Most people crumble under this kind of pressure. You don't." "I'm terrified," Nicole admitted. "Terror and strength aren't mutually exclusive," Florenzo said from where he stood near the window, a position he seemed to favor when listening to their practice sessions. He'd been present for every preparation meeting, a silent sentinel whose attention never wavered. "You've been terrified your whole life. You're still here." The observation struck deeper than Nicole expected. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something beyond the dangerous reputation and controlled violence. She saw recognition, someone who understood what it meant to survive when the world wanted you to disappear. The uncomfortable awareness between them grew in small moments. When Florenzo brought her coffee without asking how she took it, but somehow knowing she needed 3 sugars and cream. When she found him working at 3 in the morning and sat with him in companionable silence because neither of them could sleep. When his hand would steady her elbow during particularly difficult preparation sessions, the touch brief but grounding. One evening, after Antonio had left and the house had settled into its nighttime rhythm of security patrols and distant conversations in Italian, Nicole found Florenzo on the terrace overlooking the grounds. He held a glass of whiskey, his suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal the ink that covered his forearms, intricate designs that told stories she didn't know how to read. "Can I ask you something?" she said, stepping out into the cool air. He turned, unsurprised by her presence. "Always. Why does this matter so much to you?" "Really?" "Not the power play with the Virginius, but—" She gestured vaguely, struggling to articulate the question. "Me? Why do I matter?" Florenzo was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes reflecting the lights from the garden below. "My mother cleaned houses for families like the Virginius," he said finally, his voice low. "She worked 16-hour days, came home with her hands raw from chemicals and her knees aching from scrubbing floors. And they treated her like furniture, like she wasn't human enough to deserve basic dignity." He took a slow sip of whiskey. "One day, she collapsed in their kitchen. Heart attack. They called an ambulance, but only after they'd moved her outside so she wouldn't bleed on their marble floors when the paramedics arrived." Nicole felt her throat tighten. Did she? She survived. But something in her died that day. Florenzo turned to face her fully. "I was 14. I promised myself that I would become powerful enough that no one in my family would ever have to beg for dignity again. That the people who treated us as less than human would learn to fear the name Trentino." His expression softened slightly. "When I saw Charlotte standing over you with that phone, I saw my mother on that floor. And I decided that promise extended to you." Nicole stepped closer, drawn by the vulnerability he was offering, this glimpse beneath the armor. "I'm not your mother." "No," he agreed, his gaze holding hers with unexpected intensity. "You're something else entirely. You're stubborn and resilient, and you refuse to stay invisible even when visibility is dangerous. You're choosing to fight when running would be easier." He reached out, his calloused hand cupping her jaw with surprising gentleness. "That kind of courage is rare, Nicole. Worth protecting. You should step back." This man was dangerous, complicated, bound to a world of violence she didn't understand. But his touch felt like safety she'd never known, and when he looked at her, she felt seen in a way that terrified and thrilled her simultaneously. "Florenzo," she whispered, not sure what she was asking. He understood anyway. His thumb traced her cheekbone once. Then he released her, stepping back with visible effort. "When this is over, when you're safe, we'll talk about what this is between us. But right now I need to keep you alive and free. Everything else waits." The threat arrived at dawn on the 10th day, though Nicole wouldn't learn about it until hours later. She was in the garden with Maria, learning the names of flowers she'd only ever seen in magazines, when one of Florenzo's guards approached with a kind of controlled urgency that made her stomach drop. "Mr. Trentino needs you inside. Now." The study was crowded when they entered. Florenzo stood behind his desk, his expression carved from stone, while 4 of his men surrounded someone Nicole couldn't see clearly. Then the group shifted, and her blood turned to ice. Derek Marshall, her ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago, the reason she'd moved across the city and changed her phone number twice. He looked worse than she remembered, thinner, with the hollow-eyed desperation of someone who'd burned every bridge and was running out of lifelines. His hands were zip-tied behind his back, and a bruise was already blooming on his jaw. "Nicole," Derek said, his voice a mixture of pleading and practiced charm she'd once fallen for. "Thank God. Tell them there's been a mistake. I just came to check on you, make sure you're okay." "Shut up," Florenzo said quietly, and Derek's mouth snapped closed. Florenzo's eyes found Nicole's. "Do you know this man?" She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Derek Marshall. We dated." "He." She stopped, old shame rising in her throat. "He what?" Florenzo's tone gentled slightly, though his gaze remained lethal as it fixed back on Derek. "He used to hit me. When I tried to leave, he stalked me for months. Showed up at my work, my apartment, Left messages threatening to hurt himself if I didn't come back. Nicole wrapped her arms around herself, hating how small her voice sounded. I finally got away when I moved and cut all contact. Florenzo's jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jump. And now he's here. On my property. Claiming someone paid him $5,000 to get inside, find you, and tell you that your friends were worried about your safety. Derek's eyes widened. I was just supposed to talk to her, man. That's all. They said she was being held against her will by some psycho. One of Florenzo's men hit Derek hard enough to snap his head sideways. Blood spattered on the expensive carpet. Florenzo raised a hand, stopping any further violence, then walked slowly around the desk to stand directly in front of Derek. The Virginia family hired you, Florenzo said, not a question. They found someone from her past who already knew how to hurt her, who knew her vulnerabilities, and they paid you to come here and frighten her. To make her feel unsafe even under my protection. I didn't know it was a setup, I swear, Derek gasped. They just said she was in trouble. You took money to terrorize a woman you'd already abused. Florenzo crouched down to Derek's eye level, his voice dropping to something almost conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. Let me explain what happens next. You're going to tell my associate Marco everything. Who contacted you, what they said, what they paid you, and any communication you've had with the Virginias. You're going to provide evidence we can use. And then you're going to leave this city and never come back. And if I don't, Derek said, some stupid defiance still flickering. Florenzo smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Nicole had ever seen. Then they'll find pieces of you in places that will make the evening news for weeks. He stood, brushing invisible lint from his pants. But that's the difficult option. The easy option is you cooperate, and I pay you $10,000 to disappear. Choice. You have 30 seconds. Derek chose survival. Marco took him to another room to extract every detail while Florenzo turned to Nicole. His expression transforming from predatory to protective so quickly it gave her whiplash. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped firmly around her waist. You're safe, he murmured against her hair. He will never touch you again. No one will. Nicole pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, expensive cologne and whiskey and something fundamentally him, and felt something break loose inside her. Not fear. Not shame. Something that felt dangerously like trust, like belonging, like coming home to a place she'd never known existed. I believe you, she whispered, and felt his arms tighten around her. Later, when Derek had been escorted off the property with a stern warning and documentary evidence of his confession, Florenzo found Nicole in the library. She was curled in a leather chair, trying to read but mostly staring at the same page. He sat across from her, 2 glasses of wine in hand, and offered her one. The Virginias made another mistake, he said. They gave us evidence of witness tampering, intimidation, and conspiracy. Antonio is very pleased. They're getting desperate, Nicole said, accepting the wine. Desperate people make fatal errors. Florenzo leaned back, his dark eyes never leaving her face. You were remarkable today. Most people would have fallen apart. I had you, she said simply, and watched something shift in his expression. Surprise, tenderness, possession all mixed together. The press conference was scheduled for 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, timed perfectly to hit the evening news cycle and dominate social media before the Virginia family could organize a response. Florenzo had chosen neutral ground, the ballroom of the Grandview Hotel, a venue too public for the Virginias to intimidate and too prestigious to ignore. By 2:30, every major news outlet in the city had cameras positioned, reporters jockeying for the best angles, social media already buzzing with speculation about what Nicole Smith, the unstable waitress, would say. Nicole stood in the preparation room, staring at her reflection in a mirror that showed a woman she barely recognized. Maria had helped her dress in a simple but elegant navy suit that Florenzo had somehow procured in her exact size. Her hair was pulled back, professional and neat. She looked competent, credible, nothing like the wine-soaked girl on the restaurant floor. "You don't have to do this," Florenzo said from behind her. He'd been giving her exit routes all morning, reminding her that they could pursue legal channels without the public spectacle. But they both knew this was about more than legal victory. This was about reclaiming her narrative. "Yes, I do," Nicole said, turning to face him. "They made me a villain in front of millions of people. I need those same people to see the truth." Florenzo adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture she'd never seen from him before. "The moment we walk out there, there's no going back. The Virginias will retaliate in every way they can. Your life becomes public property." "My life became public property when Charlotte pushed me and pressed record," Nicole said. "At least now I get to tell my side of it." Antonio appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, showing the live stream numbers already climbing into 6 figures. "They're ready for you. Remember, stay calm, speak clearly, and let the evidence do most of the work. I'll be right there if you need me." Florenzo offered Nicole his arm, and together they walked down the corridor toward the ballroom. Camera flashes exploded as they entered, microphones thrust forward, reporters shouting questions that blurred into noise. Florenzo's men had already secured the perimeter, creating a clear path to the podium where someone had placed a glass of water and a microphone that looked simultaneously powerful and terrifying. Nicole stepped up to the podium, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Florenzo positioned himself just to her left, close enough to reach if she needed him but far enough back to make it clear this was her moment. The room gradually quieted, every phone and camera trained on her face. "My name is Nicole Smith," she began, her voice stronger than she expected. 2 weeks ago I was working my shift as a waitress at the Gilded Spoon when Charlotte, Virginia deliberately pushed me to the floor, filmed my humiliation, and posted an edited version of that video to make me look like an aggressor. What I'm about to show you is what really happened. Antonio activated the screen behind her. The unedited security footage played in crystal clarity. Charlotte approaching, the verbal confrontation, the deliberate shove, Nicole crashing to the marble floor while Charlotte and her friends laughed and recorded. The audio captured every cruel word, every mocking laugh. The timestamp proved it was original, unaltered, pulled directly from the restaurant's cloud backup. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras swiveled between the screen and Nicole, social media feeds visible on multiple devices showing the video spreading in real time. Nicole waited for the noise to die down, then continued. "The Virginia family released a statement calling me unstable and dangerous. They edited the footage to remove Charlotte pushing me. They hired my abusive ex-boyfriend to intimidate me." She nodded to Antonio, who displayed the text messages between Derek and Charlotte's family's lawyer, the payment receipts, Derek's sworn statement. "They used their money and influence to destroy my reputation because they believed I was powerless to fight back." Another video played. Charlotte's deleted text messages planning the incident, betting on whether anyone would intervene, laughing about making a waitress cry for their entertainment. The premeditation was damning, undeniable. "But I'm not powerless," Nicole said, her voice steady as steel now. "I'm here, I'm telling the truth, and I'm asking all of you to decide who you believe. A family that doctored evidence and hired someone to threaten me, or the actual footage that shows exactly what happened." She stepped back from the podium. The room exploded with questions, but Florenzo moved forward smoothly, his presence commanding immediate attention. "The Virginia family has 48 hours to issue a public apology to Ms. Smith and resign from all public positions," Florenzo said, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "If they choose not to, my attorney will be filing criminal charges for assault, conspiracy, witness tampering, and evidence falsification. Additionally, we will be releasing documentation of Harold Virginia's history of bribery, embezzlement of campaign funds, and corruption spanning 6 years. He paused, letting that sink in. The choice is theirs. They left through the back exit to the sound of reporters shouting questions and phones buzzing with notifications as the story spread across every platform, every news outlet, every conversation. In the car, Nicole finally allowed herself to breathe. "It's done," she said, though it felt surreal. Florenzo took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "It's just beginning. But you were perfect." If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That's how I'll know you truly liked it. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to join this family of fans who love emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you even more tales like this.